When it comes to the UFC, determining the ultimate greatest fighter has always been a topic of great debate. Unlike other individual sports like tennis and cycling where all athletes fight in open tournaments, combat sports divide fighters into separate weight classes, thus determining the absolute best remains a problematic task and unresolved matter. Yet this hasn't stopped fans and pundits alike from engaging in a never-ending discussion called the pound-for-pound rankings or simply P4P. So what is the UFC pound-for-pound list? Who determines the rankings and who are the fighters who held the top spot? Let's reveal the answers. I'm the Indian accent guy and you are on the Fight Book. What is the UFC pound for pound? The UFC pound for pound is a list that ranks the best 15 fighters in the organization from all weight classes and is updated on a weekly basis. It is essentially composed of the current title holders plus some of the highest ranked contenders. This list is called pound for pound because it's based solely on the fighter's success in his own division regardless of his size. The pound for pound notion is based on the following fictional idea: who would have been the absolute best if all fighters had weighed the same? Therefore, if a flyweight is ranked above a heavyweight in the pound for pound list, this doesn't mean that the 125 pounder would prevail in an actual fight against his enormous colleague, but it only suggests that he is finding more success in his own division. How are the UFC pound for pound rankings determined? The UFC pound for pound rankings are determined by a voting panel composed of around 20 highly regarded MMA journalists. However, their identities remain anonymous in order to preserve integrity and avoid unwanted controversy. The pundits must provide fresh rankings following every weekend, so the organization releases an updated list every Monday. Aside from P4P rankings, the voting panel also determines the rankings of every UFC weight class. When did the UFC add P4P rankings? The UFC launched an official pound-for-pound list in February 2013 along with top 10 rankings for every weight class. The lists were then extended to top 15. But even prior to the release of the official UFC P4P list, fight fans and observers alike had always picked one or two fighters as the consensus pound-for-pound best. Now let's see who are the fighters who held the top spot. Anderson Silva had been the consensus UFC pound-for-pound king long before the introduction of the official listing. The knockout artist wiped up the competition in the middleweight division in a reign of terror between 2006 and 2013. However, the Brazilian lost his crown in his first fight after the introduction of rankings following a stunning TKO defeat at the hands of Chris Weidman in July 2013. Moreover, a devastating leg injury in the rematch spelled the end of his days as a bona fide contender for the pound-for-pound top spot. With 6 separate stints on the top of the rankings, Jon Jones is the ultimate UFC pound-for-pound king. The American ascended the throne for the first time in July 2013 following Anderson Silva's first defeat to Chris Weidman. At the time, he had established himself as a dominant light heavyweight champion with 5 consecutive title defenses despite his relatively young age. Bones remains virtually undefeated in his MMA career, but his most fearsome foe has always been his own demeanor. Jones never lost the top P4P spot in the octagon, but rather due to recurring controversial incidents and legal troubles which marred his career and personal life. Following Jon Jones' suspension in April 2015 after he violated the UFC athlete conduct policy, the pound-for-pound throne passed to Jose Aldo, who reigned supreme over the UFC featherweight division since its creation in 2011. Nevertheless, the Brazilian's spell as top pound-for-pound fighter ended in dramatic fashion in his first fight after becoming the P4P king when Conor McGregor knocked him out in just 13 seconds at UFC 194. When Conor McGregor stunned Jose Aldo in December 2015, the Notorious became the UFC featherweight champion, but it was Demetrious Johnson who inherited the P4P crown. Mighty Mouse was the most dominant UFC champion at the time, cleaning up the flyweight division since its creation in 2012. However, his first reign was short-lived, ending in January 2016 when the company reinstated Jon Jones following a suspension. But Jones was again tested positive for drugs and got suspended for 1 year, so Johnson reclaimed the sport just after 6 months. A similar scenario signaled the end of his second stint between July 2016 and July 2017. When Jon Jones came back and reclaimed his title and the throne of P4P King, his drug tests again came positive, resulting in overturning his win into a no contest and getting DJ the position back for the third and the final time. After another year, in July 2018, Daniel Cormier cemented himself as the pound-for-pound king after becoming the champ. For his part, Demetrious lost his flyweight belt to Henry Cejudo a month later and subsequently left the organization. While most members on the list ascended the throne due to the fall of the previous P4P king, Daniel Cormier seized the crown himself by simultaneously winning 2 belts. DC was already the reigning light heavyweight champion when he knocked out Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight title in July 2018. His spell ended almost a year later when he lost the rematch to Stipe Miocic. When DC lost the belt in July 2019, it was again Jon Jones who took the throne for the 4th time, as he was already back on the track with 3 consecutive title fight victories, but it was again short-lived because after his next title defense against Dominic Reyes in February 2020, he vacated the belt and announced that he is moving up to the heavyweight division. He remained the king until one of the most dominant fighters in the sport's history, Khabib Nurmagomedov, finished his story in October 2020. Despite being one of the most dominant fighters, Khabib only topped the UFC pound-for-pound list for 6 months. Ironically, his reign occurred after announcing his retirement following his victory over Justin Gaethje. His reign ended when his retirement was made official in March 2021. And despite being inactive, Jon Jones again sits on the throne from March to October 2021. When Kamaru Usman replaced Jon Jones as the UFC pound-for-pound king in October 2021, he had already defended his welterweight belt on 4 occasions. The Nigerian then consolidated his status by beating Colby Covington for the 2nd time a month later. Nevertheless, a shocking 5th-round head kick from Leon Edwards shook the whole P4P scene, ending Usman's reign in vicious fashion in August 2022. After beating the who's who of the featherweight division, Alexander Volkanovski was the obvious pick for the UFC pound-for-pound throne following Kamaru Usman's fall. In February 2023, the Australian challenged number 2 ranked lightweight champion Islam Makhachev, and despite coming just short in a razor-tight affair, his maiden UFC defeat didn't cost him his spot on the top of the pound-for-pound list. UFC had promoted Volkanovski vs Makhachev as the fight where it will be decided who is the real pound-for-pound king, because it was the first and only time in the UFC history when P4P number 1 and P4P number 2 collided. But despite the win, UFC didn't give Islam Makhachev the P4P throne, as his decision win was very close and most people even thought that Makhachev lost that fight. So next month in March 2023, they gave the seat to Jon Jones, yes, him again, who returned after 3 years away from the sport to defeat Cyril Gane in round 1 and become the 2 divisions UFC champion. Jones took his seat for the 6th time, but again for a very short period. After 6 months in October 2023 in Abu Dhabi, Makhachev had an incredible KO win over Volkanovski in the rematch at UFC 294, which proved that he really is the current best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So finally, he sat on the P4P throne in November 2023, and right now when I'm making this video in February 2025, it doesn't look like he's gonna lose that spot very soon. For those who still think Jon Jones deserves to be the pound for pound king, consider this. Jones and his team declined to defend the 205-pound title against Chael Sonnen on 10 days notice after Dan Henderson pulled out of UFC 151 back in 2012. While Moicano on 36-hour notice for lightweight champion Islam was no problem. And that's all in this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did and want more like this, you know what to do. Please share your feedback and thoughts in the comment section, which is very important for my motivation and improvement. So do it right now and then do whatever you want.